So the video was interesting in that it presented. It's interesting mainly because it presented the idea of differing worldviews between secular worldviews and Christian worldviews, but it did so through the lens of what is generally understood as tame. A Pixar movie called Planes. No one really thinks that you know a message in Planes could one really impact lives and teach people to. I mean, you assume it teaches your kids something, but you don't think that it could really warp the way they think. And especially interesting is that you don't think that the lessons that are taught in that movie could be harmful to a youth population in any way. So I thought it was interesting that he presented a potentially harmful ideology in a trusted film company for children. Like the movie Planes. He said it. What was it? It was you don't have to be what you were designed to be. And he's like, that sounds like a cool thing that you wouldn't find fault with, but he's like, I might, and he goes into that, and that was really interesting, and yeah, and just like that, just like how that movie, could shape someone's worldview, so does, say, like my Christianity, and the fact that I've been inside of a Christian worldview my entire life. That has most likely changed how I view everything, So, for example, like I'll speak for myself. Being raised as in a Christian household, like a pastor father, certain things were no goes when I was a kid. Like you don't speak ill of people, you don't insult your parents. It's very respectful. Like for example, like in my household, you don't speak disrespectfully to your parents. You honor your parents. But like I would visit my friends and they would like say, "Mom, you're being dumb," and like I go, "Whoa," you freak out a little bit. But yeah, being a religious bent in a worldview can completely warp the way you see the world compared to someone who is not within or accepting of that religion, because inherently there are rules and a different structure to a religion. That's why it's not the entire population. There are rules that are set aside from general population, and because of that, it will cause everything to seem different. For example, something that may seem harmless to a secular person can seem terrible to a Christian person. I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about people who we were actually talking about the idea that sleeping around wasn't a big deal, and how that's different now. Because, for example, in the show How I Met Your Mother, there's a character called Barney Stinson, and he's presented as this really cool character. And part of why he's so cool is because he gets the ladies constantly. Whereas in the Christian worldview, that is extremely unwanted and extremely frowned upon. Whereas in the secular worldview, that may be something that is aspired to or seen as really cool. So that's just an example of the differences in worldview. On Facebook, it's interesting because that's almost a direct look into not just your personal group of people and acquaintances and friends, but also in yourself, in comparison to those people. For example, people who post like them drinking a lot or partying a lot, versus people who post like church, or there's never any alcohol in their pictures and it's always tame and they're always fully clothed versus showing a bit too much skin. that always skews perception. You can always tell what someone's comfortable lines are. For example, someone who's always dressed modest and brightly lit and always in a good environment in their photos. Maybe someone who's much more religious, maybe, than someone who like posts themselves like booty out, skimpy outfit, you know drinking, partying constantly, or smoking weed. Like it's always like it's a good window to seeing the contrast in worldviews, to me. For example, I have a friend who I'm talking about Snapchat now, which is not Facebook, but I don't use Facebook too much, so I can only really relate from other apps. Snapchat. His Snapchats are almost always like involving weed. I mean, I think it's legal where he is because I think he's in Colorado, but like, it's always that, or it's always him drinking and he's partying and stuff. And I know that he's not someone who's extremely religious, whereas like my ex-girlfriend, very religious. All her posts are tame, like juju bar fruit bowls, and sometimes there's like a Bible verse, and that's just like a sharp contrast. I'll like click off of his Snapchat of whatever debauchery he's doing, and then I'll go to hers, and it's like this bright, clean, extremely innocent image of whatever, and I just think that's funny. Because, and in that, like, for example, say I was a secular person viewing both of them, I don't know how I would view both of them. For example, if I was secular and I was viewing hers, I'd be like, oh, she likes Juju Bar, but also, okay, we get it, you're super innocent, like, no one's that innocent. If I was viewing his, again, not all secular people are inherently, like, bad, so I wouldn't necessarily see him as being super cool. I'd be like, whoa, this guy likes to party or something. But I also may be like, whoa, this guy parties a bit too much, but it wouldn't insult any kind of moral code in me. It may just be that this guy doesn't work very hard or something. It wouldn't insult any kind of like higher power that I believe in or any kind of faith that I have. It would just be kind of an objective look at it versus the subjective religious look. So yeah. I enjoyed the sermon. I thought it was interesting, that all these things can warp perception, and there's always two sides. There's I keep thinking about the planes thing. Like it just jumps out to me as like, yeah, it could totally just be what you think is an okay thing, like planes and their message. Like they couldn't possibly be bad, and it's not bad necessarily, but it's not always actually on the up and up. And I just think that's an interesting concept.